So in this segment, we're going to be talking about if the express fear-mongering over a Starmer and Sturgeon alliance. And basically, this article was written to protect Boris Johnson because Brexiteers have gotten in their mind that if Johnson is to go, then it opens the door for Starmer and Sturgeon to take over and essentially cancel Brexit. That's why the Express is very defensive of Boris Johnson, very very defensive, and you can see here Brexit could be torn Brexit could be torn to pieces by Starmer and Sturgeon in a destructive Labour Party and SNP plot if Boris Johnson is ousted as Prime Minister, a leading expert has warned. And this article doesn't make sense because I don't think chess squeaky. I don't think Sturgeon really cares if the Great Britain rejoins the EU. Like, she wants Scotland to join the EU. She doesn't care. Like, England can stay outside. I don't think she cares that much. It would probably help her in an independent Scotland if the entirety of Great Britain rejoined the EU or rejoined the single market and the customs union, because that question of a hard border in Scotland disappears. But I think if it's the case that they offered a look, the two options are the whole of Britain rejoins the EU and the single market and customs union, or Scotland gets independence and rejoins the single market and customs union, but England stays out of both. I think she would take the Scottish independence thing above anything. So this article is a bit nonsensical, I think, in that sense, but it's very much designed to protect the dear leader. Britain finally left the EU just over a year ago, freeing the nation from EU rules. I mean, we played a key role in those rules, so that's a load of nonsense, ending nearly 50 years of membership to the continental bloc. The Prime Minister is coming under pressure as reports looking into Partygate scandal come flooding in, with his own Conservative MPs increasingly turning against him. And, this article written on the 5th, there is still pressure on Boris Johnson. If anything, he's had a stay of execution, depending how bad you want to look at things. Now, a foreign policy analyst has warned that if Johnson is forced out of Downing Street, the entire Brexit project would be under severe threat, which is interesting because if you look at the two frontrunners, which are Sunak and Truss, they will stick with Brexit because they won't have much of a choice. At least Truss wouldn't. So it's very interesting that they've kind of rallied the wagons around Boris Johnson rather than the Tory party. They're saying if Johnson is to go, then immediately Brexit would be reversed, which we know isn't going to happen. He believes if the Tories are unsuccessful at an early general election, so this is, a bit different here, this scenario, an early general election, the earliest general election they'll have is 2023, so it would be about a year off, and generally you hold an election a year before your term's meant to end, just in case anything bad kicks off in the final year. Labour and the SNP could form a tight coalition that would defy the will of the British people and tear Brexit to pieces. The thing is, right, what the Express are kind of missing is that if Starmer and Sturgeon run on a mandate, right, obviously it'll be separate because they're two very different parties in a sense. If they run on a mandate of reversing Brexit and then they reverse Brexit, would they be defying the will of the British people, or would they be defying the will of the British people from 2016 and 2019 with a fresh mandate? This is very, very undemocratic, the way the Express have framed this. I'd say I'm disappointed, but you expect this from them. So you got Niall Gardner, who's a former aide to Margaret Thatcher, saying Boris Johnson delivered Brexit and changed British history and the country's future for the better. I mean, he didn't, did he? Look at the situation in Northern Ireland now. Look at the situation at the Dover-Calais crossing. Look at the situation at the other ports. Look at the fact that we're going to have a 4% hit to our GDP over the medium term. The fact that that EU member states are doing more trade with each other now, cutting out the UK. I mean, not really the UK, GB, really. So this point here he's made is straight up lie. The last three words there are a lie. But if he was to go, the entire Brexit project would be under severe threat. Would it, though? I don't think it would be. I think if Truss or Sunak will stick with it for the most part. Sunak already talking about deregulation of services. The cabinet members won't differ that much from Boris Johnson. I don't think they'll tear up Brexit. Especially because if they do, they're going to lose a lot of support to a potential right-wing rival party that could be run by Farage and Ticey. The left hate Boris Johnson because of what he achieved with Brexit over anything else. No, the left hate Brexit because the left hate Johnson because he's a scumbag. He's a scumbag who's taken money away from poor people. He's put loan shark Sunak there, who's lent people money essentially via council tax rebate, which is problematic, especially if you're a renter, because then your landlord gets that rebate, you don't, and then you're paying back money you haven't actually borrowed. The reason why the left hate Boris Johnson is because ideologically he makes no sense, and his policies are objectively bad for the country, but more importantly for working class people and lower middle class people. That's why I don't like Boris Johnson. 150,000 people have died during a pandemic, and Boris Johnson did very little to save them. That's why I hate Boris Johnson. So yeah, the Express's point here is rubbish. To see toppling the Prime Minister as an opportunity to bring down the entire Brexit process. I mean, partially, yes, but, toppling the Prime Minister to bring about a much better government, that would be the thing that the left should be aiming to do. Mr. Gardiner's further warned that there could be an early general election. I mean, there probably will be an early election, even if Johnson sticks it out somehow into next year. I think he's gone by end of summer. And the polls show Labour with a significant lead. I mean, Labour are still doing okay. They've changed the methodology a bit. So Labour are on 37 points rather than 42, depending on which polls you look at. But, I hope Labour do win not a stonking majority, but a good majority. This is a very cynical exercise to try and remove Boris Johnson from power. I mean, Boris Johnson has potentially broken the rules over lockdown. We've seen pictures of it. Police are investigating it. There's nothing cynical here. If your boy's broken the rules, then he's broken the rules. Stop begging it. Stop begging it. And force an early general election. Under the Tories' kind of own thing, they said that if a Prime Minister is kind of brought in midway through a term, if, you haven't won a mandate, if you weren't elected Prime Minister, through all the normal parliamentary nonsense, then you shouldn't be in charge. Theresa May criticised Gordon Brown like that. Theresa May went back to the people to get a mandate. She failed. So this argument of, if we get rid of Johnson, there'll have to be an early election. That's not true. That's not a hard rule. It's just a rule people choose to abide by. It's not a hard rule. They could easily, if say Sunak comes in tomorrow, he could run this until sort of towards the end of 2024. I think he'd have to hold an election by, I'm going to say November 24, depending on when the last one was held. So yeah, it's just a joke. They don't have to hold an early election. It just depends. That interview with Nadine Dorries was scary. If Johnson and the SNP formed a tight coalition, if Labour and the SNP formed a tight coalition, they would both defy the will of the British people. I mean, that's not true though, is it? They wouldn't defy the will of the British people, because if they're voted in by the British people, how could they then defy the will of the British people? If they ran on a mandate of putting us back into the single market and the customs union, how is that defying the will of the people if they were elected to do so? People in the Express, are you this stupid? Really? Honestly? Is this why you became journalists? Following the referendum in 2016, both Labour and the SNP frequently voiced their strong opposition towards the UK leaving the EU. Do you not understand a 4% hit to GDP in the medium term? Do you not get that? Is that a patriotic thing to do? Starmer campaigned for a second referendum on Britain's membership of the bloc in 2019. That's true, but he's also gone against freedom of movement in more recent times. So he's not going to put us back in the EU, not anytime soon. Anyways, they're not going to campaign on it because if they do, they'll lose. SNP Sturgeon, who's so I can't say that word, vented her fury towards Brexit, using it as a reason why a second referendum on Scottish independence must be held, which is true though, because the Scots were told if they get independence, they vote for independence from the UK, then they won't be allowed membership of the EU, and then we took them out of the EU. Even though Scotland voted, the majority of Scots voted to remain in the EU. So the referendum by itself did go against the will of the Scottish people. Despite the UK marginally voting in favour of Brexit, it was the opposite in Scotland, 62% wanting Britain to remain in the EU. So that whole point, that dig at Sturgeon, makes no sense when you see the vast majority of people in Scotland voted to remain. When Johnson struck a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU in 2020, Sturgeon raged. People in Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, but their views have been ignored, which is true. Which is absolutely true. The vast majority of Scots voted to remain in the EU. They vote for the SNP, who is a pro-EU party. So taking a dig at Sturgeon here makes no sense. If anything, she's listening to the will of the Scottish people. this is a far harder Brexit than could have been imagined when the EU referendum took place, because they were saying like no one is threatening our place in the single market. Only a madman would leave the single market. So to suddenly turn around and say, oh, Sturgeon is lying or whatever, or being stupid, it's just ridiculous. It's the Brexiteers who lied. We got a very thin deal, which was not promised in 2016. Freedom of movement's gone. It's impacting loads of Brits abroad as well. They weren't told this was going to happen. They thought, there was that guy famously on Channel 4, when Channel 4 interviewed him, he said, I thought they would keep freedom of movement for the proper Europeans. Whatever the hell that means. How do you define a proper European? But they clearly didn't know what they were voting for, and I don't think the vast majority of people in England knew what they were voted for because of the various different Brexit outcomes. But, this whole article is a joke. Like, yes, if Sturgeon, or to be fair, if Labour win, with an SNP coalition, what's going to happen, in my opinion, is that the Scots will get a referendum out of it, and they will leave the United Kingdom, the UK, as a union, not geographically, of course, and they will try to get EU membership as quickly as possible. That's what will end up happening. I don't know what Starmer will do. Maybe he'll look at rejoining the single market and the customs union, especially to avoid all the problems we're seeing in Northern Ireland. But, his kind of philosophy is unclear. He's talking about getting equivalency deals with the EU where possible. Again, we'll see what happens with that. But, Sturgeon's path towards the EU is much clearer than Starmer's one. We don't really know what Starmer believes for the most part. The guy's a bit of a chameleon. And you can say, oh, you're doing the Tories' work by criticising Labour. It's like, show me some policies, big man, and we'll talk. But anyways, what a joke of an article from The Express. Once again, talking about how Starmer and Sturgeon will rip up Brexit. Nah. Sturgeon will do it for the Scots, but that's about it. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.